He swapped his pregnant wife, who weighed 250 pounds, for a young and seductive mistress. Months later, she grabs his phone and finds 80 missed calls from him. What did he want from her now? Something was very wrong, and she was about to uncover the truth. "Is that really what you're wearing?" The question hung in the air like a knife. Harper Westbrook stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror, suddenly seeing every flaw in the navy blue cocktail dress she'd spent 3 weeks searching for. The fabric stretched across her hips, and despite the modest neckline, she felt exposed, vulnerable. "It's a book launch, not a fashion show," she replied to her own reflection, straightening her shoulders. Her honey-colored eyes, the one feature she genuinely liked about herself, flashed with determination. At 32, Harper had built a respectable career as a children's book editor at Bright House Publishing in Boston. Tonight was the launch of The Little Star That Could, a picture book about believing in yourself despite what others thought. Ironically, the very thing Harper struggled with daily. She grabbed her purse, refusing to change outfits for the 4th time. Outside, the autumn air bit through her light coat as she hailed a cab, giving the driver directions to the Rosemont Hotel downtown. The hotel ballroom hummed with the energy of Boston's literary scene. Authors, illustrators, and publishing executives mingled among strategically placed book displays and catering stations. Harper moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her professional confidence masking her personal insecurities. "Harper, the woman of the hour!" Her boss, Elaine, waved her over to a small group. "Everyone, this is the brilliant editor who discovered our newest bestseller. Harper, I'd like you to meet Scott Lambert from The Globe, Michelle Chen from Parents Magazine, and Tate Caldwell." Harper shook hands politely until she reached the last person. Tate Caldwell stood a head taller than everyone else, his tailored suit fitting him perfectly. His sharp jawline and confident smile screamed success, but it was his eyes, intensely blue and unexpectedly kind, that caught her attention. "The brilliant editor," he repeated, his handshake lingering. "I've heard wonderful things about your eye for storytelling." Harper blinked in surprise. "From whom?" "My sister works in children's literacy programs. She raves about your selections." His voice was deep, almost melodic. "I'm just a boring real estate developer who builds things, but she helps kids build their imaginations. The better calling, if you ask me." Before Harper could respond, Elaine pulled her away to meet important reviewers. Throughout the evening, however, she kept finding Tate in her line of sight, and more surprisingly, he seemed to be looking for her too. Near the end of the night, as the crowd thinned, Harper stood by the dessert table, secretly delighted by the mini cheesecakes. "Save one for me?" Tate appeared beside her, his smile conspirators. "They're divine," Harper admitted. "Worth every calorie." "Life's too short for calorie counting," he said, selecting one for himself. "Though I should probably be more careful. My trainer would have a fit if he saw me now." Harper's smile faltered slightly. Of course he had a trainer. Men like Tate Caldwell always did. "I was wondering," he continued, seemingly oblivious to her internal dialogue, "if you might want to get coffee sometime. I'd love to pick your brain about children's books. My niece has a birthday coming up, and I want to be the cool uncle with the perfect gift." Harper studied his face for signs of mockery or pity, the expressions she'd grown accustomed to from attractive men. Finding none, she nodded cautiously. Coffee would be nice. Coffee turned into dinner the following evening at an intimate restaurant in Beacon Hill. Harper arrived 20 minutes early, a nervous habit, and watched through the window as Tate's sleek Audi pulled up exactly on time. "I'm tired of superficial women," Tate confessed midway through their meal, swirling the wine in his glass. "The ones who care more about my bank account than conversation. You're different, Harper. You have depth and eyes that tell stories." Harper felt her cheeks flush, both flattered and skeptical. "You barely know me. I'd like to change that." Their second date was a walk through the Boston Public Garden, followed by an impromptu visit to the Museum of Fine Arts. Their third was a cooking class, where Harper discovered Tate was hilariously bad at following recipes. By their fifth date, when he kissed her beneath the twinkling lights of a restaurant patio, Harper found herself falling into something she hadn't dared hope for. "I can't believe he's interested in me," Harper confided to her best friend Leona over lunch 3 weeks into dating Tate. Leona frowned. "Why not? You're intelligent, successful, funny." "And I wear a size 20, Harper interrupted. "Let's not pretend that doesn't matter in the dating world." "Maybe it doesn't matter to him," Leona suggested. Harper wanted desperately to believe that. Tate's world was different from hers in every way. His penthouse apartment overlooked the harbor. He attended charity galas and investor meetings. He played golf at exclusive clubs and knew the maitre d's at Boston's finest restaurants by name. Yet he seemed genuinely happy to bring Harper into that world. He introduced her proudly to business associates, kept his arm around her waist at social functions, and always made sure she knew how much he valued her perspective. "Most people in my circle just tell me what they think I want to hear," he told her one night as they curled up on his absurdly comfortable couch. "You tell me the truth. Do you know how rare that is?" 6 months after their first date, Harper was stunned when Tate asked her to move in with him. "My place is so empty without you," he said, nuzzling her neck as they stood in his kitchen. "Think about it. Waking up together every morning. No more packing overnight bags. Your books mingling with mine on the shelves." Harper hesitated. "Are you sure? It's a big step." "I've never been more sure of anything," he replied, and the certainty in his eyes convinced her. Living together revealed new dimensions of their relationship. Harper discovered Tate was meticulously neat, but completely helpless at laundry. He learned she sang off-key in the shower and could spend hours lost in manuscript editing without noticing the time. There were adjustments. Tate's friends, mostly other successful businessmen and their impeccably groomed wives, were polite but distant toward Harper. She noticed the evaluating glances, the subtle once-overs that made her feel like an oddity in their midst. "Don't mind Caroline," Tate said after one particularly uncomfortable dinner party. "She's just jealous that you have both brains and beauty." Harper had smiled weakly, unconvinced. On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after they met, Tate took Harper to the public garden where they'd had their second date. As swans glided across the pond, he dropped to one knee, producing a diamond ring that caught the autumn sunlight. "You've changed my life, Harper Westbrook. Marry me." The wedding was a lavish affair at an oceanfront estate on Cape Cod, with 200 guests and no expense spared. Harper had insisted on paying for her own dress, an ivory A-line gown that made her feel beautiful despite the bridal consultant's initial skepticism. "You look like a goddess," Tate whispered when he saw her walking down the aisle. For the first time in her life, Harper believed it might be true. Married life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Harper continued her work at Bright House, while Tate expanded his real estate development company into neighboring states. They traveled, Paris for their honeymoon, then Tokyo, London, and Barcelona in the following year. Harper's passport, previously stamped only for a college trip to Canada, filled with exotic destinations. Yet subtle shifts began to appear. Tate, who had once claimed to love Harper's curves, started making suggestions about gym memberships and personal trainers. "I just want you to be healthy," he'd say, his tone gentle but insistent. "I want us to grow old together, and that means taking care of ourselves now." When Harper protested that her annual physical showed perfect health despite her size, he'd smile and drop the subject, only to bring it up again a few weeks later. At social events, Harper increasingly felt like an accessory rather than a partner. Tate would introduce her as "my brilliant wife, the editor," but then steer conversations toward his latest business ventures. She'd catch glimpses of his friends' wives exchanging glances when she reached for dessert or asked for wine refills. "You're imagining things," Tate assured her when she finally voiced her concerns. "They adore you. Who wouldn't?" But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew alongside their attempts to start a family. After a year of trying to conceive naturally, they consulted fertility specialists. Tests revealed no obvious issues, leading to the frustrating diagnosis of unexplained infertility. Each month brought hope, followed by disappointment. "Maybe it's my weight," Harper suggested one night after another negative test. Tate was silent for a moment too long before responding. "Let's just keep trying. It'll happen when it's meant to." Their second anniversary passed, then their third. Harper threw herself into her work, championing diverse characters in children's literature and pushing for stories that reflected real children's experiences. At home, the fertility treatments and scheduled intimacy had stripped away the spontaneity of their early relationship. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Harper stared in disbelief at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. She took 3 more tests to be sure before calling Tate's office. "Mr. Caldwell is in a meeting," his assistant informed her. "Could you please interrupt? It's important. It's his wife." Moments later, Tate's voice came through the line. "Harper, is everything okay?" "We're pregnant," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. It finally happened. The silence on the other end lasted just a beat too long before Tate's voice returned, filled with apparent joy. "That's wonderful news. I'll be home early to celebrate." That night they drank sparkling cider and made plans for converting the guest room into a nursery. Tate seemed genuinely excited, touching Harper's still flat stomach with wonder. "You're going to be an amazing mother," he said, kissing her forehead. The first trimester brought severe morning sickness. Harper lost her appetite completely, then regained it with intense cravings for carbohydrates as the nausea subsided. Her body swelled with the pregnancy, adding pounds to her already substantial frame. Tate's behavior shifted subtly. His late nights at the office became more frequent. Business trips to New York, previously rare, now happened every other week. When home, he was attentive and kind, asking about doctor's appointments and bringing home baby books. But something felt different. "I think we should hire a night nurse when the baby comes," he suggested one evening. "You'll need your rest." "I'd rather try on our own first," Harper replied. "I want those early bonding moments, even the difficult ones." Tate nodded, but his expression was distant. "Whatever you think is best." At 6 months pregnant, Harper waddled through her doctor's office, feeling both blessed and uncomfortable in her changing body. The ultrasound had confirmed they were having a girl, and they decided to name her Phoebe, after Harper's grandmother. That evening, Tate called to say he'd be working late again. "The New York deal is more complicated than we anticipated," he explained. "Don't wait up." Harper sat alone at their dining table, the elaborate meal she'd prepared growing cold. She absently rubbed her rounded belly, feeling Phoebe's kicks. "It's just you and me tonight, little one," she murmured, trying to ignore the growing knot of unease in her chest. The pattern continued for weeks. Tate's absences grew longer, his explanations vaguer. When he was home, he was on his phone responding to urgent emails or taking calls in his home office with the door closed. On a rainy Friday afternoon, Harper decided to surprise him. She prepared his favorite butternut squash soup, packed it carefully in a thermal container, and took a cab to his downtown office building. She'd show up with lunch, maybe convince him to take a break and feel the baby kick. Perhaps it would remind him of the connection they once shared. As the elevator climbed to the 27th floor, Harper felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with nervousness. She hadn't been to Tate's office in months, and showing up unannounced wasn't her style. But something had to change. They were about to become parents, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were drifting further apart just when they should be drawing closer. The elevator doors opened onto the sleek reception area of Caldwell Development Group. Strangely, the receptionist's desk was empty, though Harper could hear voices from deeper within the office suite. She hesitated, then walked past the vacant desk toward Tate's corner office, the lunch bag growing heavy in her hand. As she approached, she heard laughter coming from the conference room. Tate's distinctive chuckle mingled with a woman's light, musical laugh. Harper paused outside the partially open door, suddenly unsure. Something about that laugh made her stomach tighten in a way that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. Harper's hand trembled on the conference room door. She should announce herself, should clear her throat or knock, anything to alert them to her presence. Instead, she found herself frozen, listening to the conversation inside. "You're insatiable," the woman's voice purred, followed by the unmistakable sound of a kiss. "Only for you," Tate replied, his voice husky with desire, a tone Harper hadn't heard in months. She leaned forward slightly, just enough to see through the crack in the door. The thermal bag slipped in her sweaty grip as the scene came into focus. Tate stood with his back to the door, his suit jacket discarded on a chair. A woman, tall, slender, and strikingly beautiful with shoulder-length blonde hair, had her arms wrapped around his neck. They were pressed against the conference table, locked in an intimate embrace that left no doubt about their relationship. "When are you going to tell her?" the woman asked, pulling back slightly. "Soon, Brielle. After the baby is born," Tate sighed. "I can't just walk away from a pregnant woman, even someone like her." "Someone like her?" Brielle laughed, a tinkling sound devoid of warmth. "You mean someone who weighs as much as both of us combined?" Tate didn't correct her. Instead, he chuckled along. "You know I'm only staying because of the prenup. If I leave now, I lose half of everything." The thermal bag slipped from Harper's fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. The sound was enough to alert the couple, who turned toward the door in unison. Harper didn't wait to see their reactions. Shame and rage propelled her backward, away from the scene that had just shattered her world. She stumbled toward the elevator, jabbing the button repeatedly as tears blurred her vision. Behind her she heard Tate's voice calling her name, but the elevator doors mercifully closed before he could reach her. In the lobby, Harper pushed through the revolving door into the rain, not bothering with her umbrella. The cold drops mingled with her tears as she walked blindly down the busy street, bumping into annoyed pedestrians. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her purse. Tate, undoubtedly. She ignored it. After walking several blocks, the reality of her situation finally penetrated the fog of shock. She was 6 months pregnant, standing in the rain, miles from home, with no plan. Harper ducked into a coffee shop, found the bathroom, and locked herself in a stall. She sank onto the closed toilet lid, wrapped her arms around her swollen belly, and finally allowed herself to break down completely. 20 minutes and countless paper towels later, Harper emerged from the bathroom, face puffy but composed. She ordered a hot chocolate and sat in the farthest corner of the cafe, finally checking her phone. 15 missed calls from Tate, 7 voicemails, 23 text messages ranging from "please let me explain" to "where are you, I'm worried." The last message read simply, "I'm coming home. Please be there. We need to talk." Harper almost laughed at the absurdity. We need to talk. As if this were a minor disagreement about dinner plans or vacation destinations. As if she hadn't just discovered that her entire marriage was a financial calculation. She considered her options. She could go to Leona's apartment, but her friend was out of town at a conference. She could check into a hotel, but that seemed like running away. And despite everything, this confrontation was inevitable. So Harper went home, to the luxury penthouse that had never truly felt like hers, and waited. Tate arrived an hour later, his hair disheveled, tie askew. He'd clearly left work in a hurry. When he saw Harper sitting calmly on the living room sofa, visible relief washed over his face. "Thank God you're okay. I was worried sick." Harper stared at him, this stranger she'd shared a bed with for years. "Were you really? That would require caring." Tate winced. "Harper, what you saw, what I saw, was my husband kissing another woman. What I heard was worse." Her voice remained steady, surprising even herself. "Someone like her, the prenup. Does that cover everything, or did I miss some other repulsive thing you said about me?" Tate sat across from her, running his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "No, I imagine not. You were going to wait until after I'd given birth to leave me. So thoughtful." "I didn't want to cause you stress during pregnancy," he said, as if this were a point in his favor. "I was thinking about the baby." "How long?" Harper asked. Tate looked away. "Brielle and I met about a year ago. She's the new marketing director for the company." "A year?" Harper did the math. "So while we were doing fertility treatments, while I was taking hormones and scheduling sex like a military operation, you were sleeping with your marketing director." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Tate? Explain it to me." He stood up, pacing the room. "Brielle and I connected. She understands my world, my ambitions. She's more compatible with my lifestyle." The word lifestyle hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Harper felt her last shred of hope dissolve. "You mean she looks better on your arm at business functions?" she translated. "She fits the image you want to project." Tate didn't deny it. "This isn't working anymore, Harper. Surely you felt it too." "What I felt was morning sickness while carrying your child. What I felt was lonely when you started working late and traveling constantly. What I felt was insecure when your friends looked at me like I was some curiosity you'd dragged in. But no, I didn't feel that my husband was planning to abandon me because I failed to maintain the proper trophy wife appearance." Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant sound of traffic below and the rhythmic ticking of the artisan wall clock Tate had imported from Switzerland. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight," he finally said. "We should both take some time to think about next steps." "Next steps," Harper repeated hollowly. "Like divorce." "Let's not rush into anything," Tate cautioned. "This is complicated now, with the baby." "It's actually very simple," Harper countered. "Oh, you don't want to be married to me. You're only here because of financial concerns. That's not a marriage worth saving." That night, lying alone in their king-sized bed, Harper felt Phoebe kicking vigorously as if protesting the day's events. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering promises in the darkness. "We'll be okay, little one. Whatever happens, you and I are going to be just fine." The next morning, Harper called in sick to work, then contacted a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who'd gone through a high-profile split the previous year. The attorney, Catherine Winters, agreed to see her that afternoon. "Glad to see you're not wasting time," Catherine said after Harper explained her situation, "especially given your pregnancy." "I need to know where I stand legally," Harper replied, "and what I can expect." Catherine reviewed the prenuptial agreement Harper had brought along. "This is fairly standard for someone of your husband's wealth. If you divorce before your 5th anniversary, you receive 20% of assets acquired during the marriage, rather than the usual 50% in Massachusetts." "And if he's been unfaithful?" Catherine looked up sharply. "Does the agreement include an infidelity clause?" Harper shook her head. "I didn't think to ask for one when we married. I trusted him. Without an infidelity clause, his affair doesn't affect the financial terms of your divorce." Catherine removed her glasses. "However, given your condition and the delicate nature of the situation, we may have some negotiating leverage. Men like your husband usually care about their public image." Over the next few weeks, a cold war settled over the penthouse. Tate continued sleeping in the guest room and maintained the pretense of their marriage in public. Harper focused on preparing for the baby and consulting with her attorney. They moved around each other like ghosts, careful to maintain distance. The silence broke one evening when Tate returned from work earlier than usual, carrying a folder of documents. "I think we should discuss terms," he said, sitting across from Harper at the dining table. "I've had my lawyer draft something fair." Harper took the folder without opening it. "I'll have Catherine review this." "Catherine?" "My attorney." Harper met his eyes steadily. "Did you think I wouldn't get representation?" Something flickered across Tate's face. Surprise, perhaps respect. "Of course not, that's sensible." The next day, Catherine called with her assessment. "He's offering more than the prenup requires." "Not by much, but it's a start." "Why?" Harper asked. "My guess, he wants this handled quickly and quietly. Men in his position usually do." After 2 rounds of negotiations, they reached an agreement significantly more favorable than the prenuptial terms. Harper would receive the apartment in Back Bay that she'd owned before their marriage, which Tate had convinced her to keep as an investment property, a generous monthly child support payment, and a lump sum that would provide financial security for years to come. "He's being unusually generous," Catherine noted during their final meeting. "And he's not fighting for any custody rights beyond standard visitation. He wants his freedom," Harper replied, understanding with painful clarity. "And he doesn't want a messy public divorce that might affect his business reputation." The divorce was finalized with surprising speed, helped along by Tate's connections and willingness to concede to most of Harper's requests. They agreed to tell friends and associates that they had grown apart and were parting amicably for the good of their child. Harper moved into her old apartment, which felt both familiar and strange after years away. She hired painters to remove all traces of the tenant who had lived there during her marriage, choosing soft yellows and greens for the nursery. 2 weeks after the divorce papers were signed, Harper was arranging baby clothes in the newly assembled dresser when her phone pinged with a social media notification. Tate had posted a photo of himself and Brielle at a charity gala, her hand conspicuously displaying a massive diamond ring. The caption read, "New beginnings with this extraordinary woman. Engaged." Harper stared at the image. Tate in a tuxedo, Brielle radiant in a form-fitting gown that showcased her model-like figure. They looked like they belonged on a magazine cover, all perfect angles and dazzling smiles. The post already had hundreds of congratulatory comments, including many from mutual friends who surely knew the timeline made this relationship an affair. She put down her phone and continued folding tiny onesies and socks, refusing to give them the satisfaction of her tears. When Leona called minutes later, clearly having seen the post, Harper answered with forced cheerfulness. "Can you believe it?" Leona fumed. "Not even a month after your divorce, it's disgusting." "It's not surprising," Harper corrected her. "They've been together for a year, apparently." "That absolute..." "Don't," Harper interrupted. "I'm trying to stay positive for the baby. Stress isn't good for her." Leona sighed. "You're right. What can I do to help? Come over Sunday. Help me assemble this crib that's currently defeating me?" The following month, glossy magazines featured Tate and Brielle's engagement photos taken on a private beach in the Maldives. Harper glimpsed the cover while grocery shopping and deliberately chose another checkout lane to avoid seeing more. As her due date approached, Harper took maternity leave from Bright House. Her colleagues threw her a surprise baby shower, loading her with gifts and promises of help once the baby arrived. Single motherhood is challenging but rewarding, her boss Elaine, a single mother herself, assured her, and you have all of us for support. The remainder of Harper's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparations and prenatal appointments. Tate attended one ultrasound, standing awkwardly at the edge of the room, then sent his assistant to all subsequent checkups with notes about urgent business conflicts. At night, alone in her apartment, Harper would often find herself wondering how everything had gone so wrong. She'd believed in their love, in Tate's declarations that he valued her mind and heart above all else. She'd trusted him when he said her body was beautiful to him. Every memory now felt tainted, retroactively transformed into lies. He seemed so sincere, she told her therapist during one particularly difficult session. Was it all an act from the beginning? Was I just convenient until someone better came along? Dr. Lewis shook her head. We can't know what was in his heart, but we can work on how you move forward, how you rebuild trust in yourself and eventually in others. As December turned to January and Harper's due date drew closer, she steeled herself for the reality of giving birth without a partner by her side. Leona had offered to be her birthing coach, and Harper had gratefully accepted, attending classes together where they were the only pair without a romantic relationship. You're not alone, Leona reminded her during their final practice session. You have people who love you, who will be there for you and Phoebe. Harper nodded, trying to believe it. But as she waddle-walked back to her apartment through the light snow, she couldn't help feeling the absence of the future she'd thought was certain. A loving husband beside her, a father eager to meet his daughter, a family whole and complete. Instead, she had nursery furniture she'd assembled with friends, a closet full of baby clothes bought with her own money, and the knowledge that somewhere across town, Tate and Brielle were planning a wedding while she prepared to bring their child into the world. The baby's first strong kick of the evening caught Harper mid-thought. She placed her hand over the spot, feeling the determined little nudge against her palm. It's just us now, she whispered to her unborn daughter. But maybe that's enough. The contractions began at 3:17 a.m. on a frigid January morning. Harper awoke with a gasp, the sharp pain wrapping around her lower back like a vice. She reached for her phone, fingers fumbling in the darkness, and called Leona. It's time, she managed between measured breaths. 30 minutes later, they were navigating the quiet streets of Boston toward Massachusetts General Hospital, where a birthing suite awaited. The city lay under a blanket of fresh snow, streetlights casting golden halos through the flurries. Should we call him? Leona asked as they checked in. Harper hesitated, then nodded. He's still her father. Tate didn't answer his phone, so Harper sent a text. In labor at Mass General. Simple, factual, devoid of emotion. The next 14 hours blurred into a fog of pain, determination, and extraordinary effort. Nurses came and went. Doctors checked her progress. Leona remained steadfast, offering ice chips, back rubs, and unwavering support. Through it all, Harper's phone remained silent. At 5:42 p.m., with a final primal push, Phoebe Elizabeth Westbrook entered the world, her indignant cry filling the delivery room. The doctor placed her on Harper's chest, and the universe seemed to realign itself around this tiny, perfect being with a shock of dark hair and impossibly small fingers. "Hello, beautiful," Harper whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting for you." An hour later, as Harper was being moved to a recovery room, her phone finally chimed with Tate's response. "In Hong Kong for business. Flying back tomorrow. Congratulations." Harper stared at the message, feeling nothing but a dull acknowledgement. Tate's absence, on perhaps the most important day of their lives, seemed fitting somehow, the final confirmation that she was truly on her own. The next morning, as Harper was learning to nurse Phoebe, a delivery arrived. An enormous arrangement of pink roses and lilies, accompanied by a teddy bear so large it required its own chair. The card read simply, "She's beautiful, like her mother. Tate." Leona snorted when she saw it. "He thinks flowers make up for missing the birth of his child. He doesn't think anything about me anymore," Harper replied, adjusting Phoebe at her breast. "This is about appearing to be the good guy." The caring father. 2 days later, as Harper was preparing to take Phoebe home, Tate finally appeared at the hospital door, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, holding another, smaller bouquet. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. Harper nodded, suddenly aware of her unwashed hair and the hospital gown that still felt more practical than her own clothes. Tate approached the bassinet cautiously, peering down at the sleeping newborn. His expression softened immediately, the practiced business mask slipping to reveal genuine wonder. "She's perfect," he breathed. "Yes, she is. Can I hold her?" Harper hesitated, then nodded. She watched as Tate awkwardly gathered the bundled baby into his arms, his confident demeanor replaced by the universal uncertainty of a first-time parent. "Hello, Phoebe," he said softly. "I'm your dad." Something twisted in Harper's chest. Not jealousy exactly, but a complex ache for what might have been, for the family they could have created if Tate had truly loved her. "I want to be part of her life," Tate said, looking up from the baby to meet Harper's eyes. "A real part, not just child support payments. We already agreed on visitation in the divorce settlement." "I know, but I'm asking as her father, not as your ex-husband. I don't want to be a weekend dad. I want to be involved." Harper studied him, searching for ulterior motives. "What does Brielle think about that?" A shadow crossed Tate's face. "She understands this is important to me." The conversation was interrupted by a nurse arriving to complete Harper's discharge paperwork. By silent agreement, they tabled the discussion of co-parenting for another day. The first weeks of Phoebe's life passed in an exhausting blur of feedings, diaper changes, and brief, precious moments of sleep. Harper settled into the rhythm of new motherhood, with Leona's help and occasional visits from colleagues who brought home-cooked meals and much-needed adult conversation. True to his word, Tate began regular visits once Harper felt recovered enough for company. Every Wednesday evening and Sunday afternoon, he would arrive at the apartment, always bearing extravagant gifts for Phoebe, and taking dutiful turns changing diapers and giving bottles of pumped breast milk. Harper observed his efforts with cautious appreciation. Whatever his flaws as a husband, Tate seemed determined to be an attentive father. His child support payments arrived punctually, often accompanied by extra funds for anything Phoebe might need. Meanwhile, tabloids and social media buzzed with updates about Tate and Brielle's relationship. They were photographed at the opening of a new Caldwell development property in Miami, at a celebrity-filled gala in New York, on a yacht in St. Tropez. Their wedding was reportedly scheduled for June at a castle in Scotland. Harper avoided these stories as much as possible, focusing instead on Phoebe's developing personality, her serious expressions when encountering something new, her delighted giggles during bath time, the way her tiny hand would curl around Harper's finger while nursing. By May, Harper had established a manageable routine. She worked from home 3 days a week, with a nanny helping on those days, and spent the other 2 days fully dedicated to Phoebe. The wounds of her failed marriage were gradually healing, replaced by the deep, transformative love she felt for her daughter. Then on a warm spring afternoon, while Phoebe napped peacefully in her bassinet, Harper's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "I need to speak with you about Tate Caldwell. You're not the only one, and you should know the whole truth. Vanessa Mercer." Harper stared at the message, her heart racing. Her first instinct was to delete it. She'd worked hard to move forward, to build a life untethered from Tate's betrayal. Did she really want to reopen that wound? After careful consideration, she replied, "What is this about?" The response came quickly. "Not over text. Can we meet? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Thinking Cup on Newbury." Harper arranged for the nanny to stay an extra hour the next day and arrived at the coffee shop precisely at 2. The place was busy with the afternoon crowd, tourists shopping the upscale street, students with laptops, business people on late lunch breaks. A slender woman with auburn hair and sharp green eyes waved from a corner table. Harper recognized her immediately. Vanessa Mercer was a well-regarded architect whose sustainable design project had won several awards the previous year. "Thank you for meeting me," Vanessa said as Harper sat down. "I ordered you a chai latte. I hope that's okay. Your assistant mentioned once that's what you prefer." Harper blinked in surprise. "My assistant?" "When I would call Tate's office, sometimes she would put me on hold, and I'd chat with your assistant to pass the time." Vanessa stirred her own coffee nervously. "That probably sounds strange. Why would you be calling Tate's office regularly?" Vanessa took a deep breath. "Tate and I had an affair. It lasted about 6 months, ending shortly before your divorce." The words hung in the air between them. Harper felt oddly calm, as if hearing about yet another betrayal could no longer touch her. "I see," she said simply. "He told me his marriage was just for convenience," Vanessa continued. "That you had an arrangement, that you were both seeing other people. When I discovered that was a lie, that you were actually trying to have a baby together, I ended it immediately." Harper's hands tightened around her mug. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I recently learned I wasn't the first, or the last." Vanessa pulled out her phone, opening a photo gallery. Sarah Chen, interior designer; Madison Ellis, financial analyst; Rebecca Townsend, yoga instructor. All before Brielle. Harper looked at the photos. Professional women in various settings with Tate, his arm around them, his smile intimate and familiar. The dates on the photos spanned the entirety of their marriage. "And after Brielle?" Harper asked, already guessing the answer. "Kylie Dawson, 22, legal intern at his company's law firm. It started 2 months ago." Vanessa showed her a final photo. Tate and a young blonde woman slipping into a hotel side entrance, his hand possessively on her lower back. "How do you know all this?" "Sarah and I move in the same professional circles. We discovered our connection by accident at a conference. Then we found the others through, well, let's call it determined investigation." Harper sat back, absorbing the information. "I appreciate you telling me, but why does this matter now? Tate and I are divorced. His relationship with Brielle is their business." Vanessa leaned forward. "Because he's doing to her exactly what he did to you, and to us. The pattern never changes. He finds someone who enhances his image, makes them feel special and chosen, then cheats relentlessly while maintaining the perfect public facade." On the walk home, Harper's mind raced with this new information. All those business trips, late meetings, weekend conferences, how many had been covers for his affairs? How many women had there been that even Vanessa didn't know about? The revelation should have devastated her. Instead, Harper felt an unexpected lightness, as if a persistent question had finally been answered. It had never been about her weight, her appearance, or anything she had done or failed to do. It was about Tate's character, his fundamental inability to be faithful to anyone. At home, she relieved the nanny and spent the evening playing with Phoebe on the living room floor, marveling at her daughter's perfect innocence, her complete trust in the world around her. "I'll make sure you know your worth," she whispered, as Phoebe drifted to sleep in her arms. "No one will ever make you feel like you're not enough." The next morning brought an unexpected call from Elaine at Bright House. "Harper, darling, have you seen the news?" "What news?" "About Tate and his fiancée. It's all over the business pages." Harper quickly opened her laptop, finding the headline immediately. "Power couple splits, Brielle Davis ends engagement to developer Tate Caldwell amid infidelity rumors." The article detailed how Brielle had publicly called off the engagement at a charity event the previous evening, dramatically returning the ring after allegedly discovering evidence of ongoing betrayal. Financial analysts were already speculating about the impact on Caldwell Development's reputation and ongoing projects. Harper had barely processed this when her phone began buzzing incessantly. Tate, call after call, text after text, voicemails piling up. "Harper, please pick up. Everything's falling apart. I need to talk to you. I've made terrible mistakes. Please, for Phoebe's sake." For hours she ignored the barrage, focusing instead on her daughter and the freelance editing project she'd been working on. But as evening approached, the calls became more frequent, more desperate. The final text read simply, "I'm outside your building, please come down." Harper peered through her living room window to the street below. There, sitting on the steps of her brownstone, was Tate, disheveled, unshaven, his usually immaculate appearance completely undone. After settling Phoebe in her crib with the baby monitor nearby, Harper descended the 3 flights of stairs to the building entrance. She pushed open the heavy door to find Tate looking up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "You look terrible," she observed, remaining in the doorway. "Brielle left me," he said, his voice rough. "She found out about Kylie." "The intern," Harper nodded. "I know." Confusion flashed across Tate's face. "How could you possibly—" "I had an interesting conversation with Vanessa Mercer yesterday, and Sarah Chen, by phone this morning." Tate's face drained of color. "Harper, Save it," she interrupted. "Your personal life isn't my concern anymore." "Brielle took everything," he continued, desperation edging his voice. The Brookline house is in her name. I transferred it as an engagement gift. She emptied our joint accounts. She even sold some of my investments using powers of attorney I signed without reading carefully. Despite everything, Harper felt a startling bubble of laughter rise in her chest. Karma really is something, isn't it? Harper, Tate said, his tone suddenly soft. I've realized what I threw away. You and Phoebe are my real family. The only real thing I've ever had. He stood, moving toward her, reaching for her hands. We could try again. I've changed. I've learned my lesson. For a fleeting moment, Harper felt the pull of familiarity. A tiny part of her, the insecure part that had always believed she didn't deserve true love, almost wavered. But then she thought of Phoebe sleeping peacefully upstairs, of the pain she'd felt discovering Tate's betrayal, of the nights spent crying herself to sleep, of the slow, difficult journey to rebuild her self-esteem. She stepped back, creating distance between them. No, Tate, this isn't about you learning a lesson, it's about me having learned mine. The surprise on his face was evident. He had clearly expected her to welcome him back, grateful for a second chance. But what about Phoebe? He argued. She needs a complete family. She needs parents who respect each other and model what real love and dignity look like, Harper replied. You can and should be part of her life, but not mine. Not like that. Tate seemed to deflate before her eyes. You'll regret this, he muttered. You won't find anyone like me. Harper smiled faintly. That's the idea. As she turned to go back inside, Tate called after her, his voice breaking with what sounded like genuine emotion. I really did love you, Harper. In my way. She paused, her hand on the door. Your way wasn't enough. Not for me. Not for Brielle. Not for any of the others. That's your tragedy, Tate, not mine. The heavy door closed behind her with a definitive click, leaving Tate alone on the steps in the gathering dusk. The summer heat arrived in Boston with unrelenting intensity, turning the brick-lined streets into urban heat traps. Harper adapted her schedule around the weather, taking early morning walks with Phoebe before the temperature climbed, then retreating to the blessed coolness of her apartment during the worst of the afternoon sun. 2 months had passed since Tate's dramatic appearance on her doorstep. True to form, he had quickly recalibrated after her rejection. Within weeks, he'd secured new investors to stabilize his company, and was photographed at industry events with a carefully constructed smile that revealed nothing of his personal setbacks. His visits with Phoebe continued with mechanical regularity. Every Wednesday evening and Sunday afternoon, he arrived precisely on time, bearing expensive gifts and maintaining the appearance of the devoted father. Harper observed how he seemed to genuinely light up around their daughter, who was now babbling and reaching for objects with determined little hands. She has your eyes, Tate remarked during one visit, as Phoebe stared up at him with her serious honey-colored gaze. And your stubbornness, Harper replied, watching their daughter refuse to release the rattle she had claimed. These moments of peaceful co-parenting were interspersed with tense discussions about Tate's desire for overnight visits once Phoebe was older, and disagreements about Harper's decision to return to in-office work 3 days a week. She needs stability at this age, Tate argued. Bright House would certainly allow you to work remotely indefinitely. She has stability, Harper countered, and I need adult interaction and professional fulfillment. The nanny is excellent, and Phoebe is thriving. These exchanges left Harper emotionally drained, second-guessing her choices, despite her certainty that they were right for both her and Phoebe. After particularly difficult interactions with Tate, she found herself standing before the bathroom mirror, evaluating her reflection with his critical voice echoing in her mind. During one such moment, as she catalogued perceived flaws in her postpartum body, a memory surfaced of something her therapist had said months earlier. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. Harper stepped back from the mirror. As long as she allowed Tate's opinions to matter, as long as she measured herself through his lens, she would remain trapped in the cycle of inadequacy he had helped create. That evening, she made a decision. The following week, Harper arrived 10 minutes early for her therapy session with Dr. Lewis. I think I need to expand my social circle, she announced as soon as she sat down. Beyond work and Leona and other parents at daycare, I need to meet people who don't know me as Tate's ex-wife or just as Phoebe's mom. Dr. Lewis nodded encouragingly. That's a healthy recognition. What are you considering? There's a single parent support group that meets at the community center near my apartment. So I've walked past the flyer dozens of times, but always found excuses not to go. What's stopping you? Harper sighed. Fear, I guess. Of being judged. Of being the biggest person in the room. Of having nothing interesting to say beyond talking about my baby and my failed marriage. Those sound like Tate's judgments, not yours, Dr. Lewis observed. The following Thursday evening, with Phoebe settled at home with the nanny, Harper stood outside the community center's multi-purpose room, gathering her courage. Through the windows, she could see about a dozen people arranged in a circle of chairs, some chatting casually while others checked phones or arranged coffee cups. First time, Harper turned to find a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes standing nearby, holding a paper bag from the local bakery. Is it that obvious? She asked. Only because you have the same "do I really want to do this" expression I had 6 months ago. He smiled, extending his hand. Henry Armstrong, Harper Westbrook. Well, Harper Westbrook, I brought cookies to bribe everyone into liking me. You're welcome to claim credit for half if it helps with the first-timer nerves. The unexpected offer of alliance made her laugh. Does that actually work? Sugar-based diplomacy? Never fails. Henry's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Shall we face the gauntlet together? Inside, the group welcomed them warmly. Harper discovered that Single Parents United was less of a traditional support group and more of a practical community. They discussed childcare emergencies, traded pediatrician recommendations, and offered tips for navigating school systems and children's health care. To Harper's surprise, nobody asked about her weight, her divorce, or implied she wasn't capable of raising Phoebe well on her own. The judgments she had feared existed only in her mind. After the meeting, as people gathered their belongings, Henry approached her again. So did the cookie bribery ensure you'll come back next week? He asked. The chocolate chip persuasion was effective, Harper admitted, but actually I found it helpful. These people understand challenges I'm facing that my other friends just can't, like explaining to a toddler why daddy doesn't live with them. Phoebe's still too young for that conversation, thankfully. But yes, eventually, Henry nodded. My Emma asked when she was 3. Hardest conversation of my life. Emma is your daughter? Yes, she's just turned 1. My wife, Diane, died during childbirth. Placental abruption. He stated the facts with the practiced calm of someone who had repeated them many times, though pain still shadowed his eyes. Unexpected and quick, the doctors couldn't save her. I'm so sorry, Harper said, genuinely moved. Thank you. Henry glanced at his watch. I should go. The babysitter charges extra after 9, but I'll see you next week. Definitely. Over the following months, Harper became a regular at the weekly meetings. She found herself looking forward to the camaraderie, the practical advice, and, though she was slow to admit it, Henry's thoughtful observations and dry humor. She learned that he was a literature professor at Boston University, specializing in American modernism. He had met his late wife in graduate school, and they had been married for 7 years before her death. He lived in a book-filled apartment in Cambridge, juggled his teaching schedule around Emma's needs, and made terrible but enthusiastic attempts at homemade baby food. Their conversations gradually extended beyond the group meetings. Coffee after sessions became dinner at a family-friendly restaurant where Phoebe and Emma were introduced. The babies, though still too young for true interaction, seemed content in each other's presence. Harper found herself drawn to Henry's quiet intelligence and obvious devotion to his daughter. Unlike Tate, who had always treated fatherhood as a role to perform, Henry approached parenting with thoughtful intentionality and genuine joy. It's exhausting and terrifying, and the greatest privilege of my life, he told Harper one evening as they watched the girls play on a blanket in the park. Every day I think about what Diane is missing, and it breaks my heart. But then Emma smiles, and I know I have to keep going, keep trying to be enough for her. You're more than enough, Harper said softly, recognizing the same insecurity she often felt. Emma is lucky to have you. Their friendship deepened naturally over shared experiences and mutual understanding. Henry never commented on Harper's size, never suggested fitness routines or diet plans. He listened when she spoke, valued her opinions about literature and politics, and seemed genuinely interested in her work as an editor. 6 months after they met, during a rare adults-only dinner, while both babies stayed with their respective babysitters, Henry reached across the table and took Harper's hand. I need to tell you something, he said, his expression serious. Harper's heart sank. Here it comes, she thought. The "you're a wonderful friend" speech. I'm falling in love with you, Henry said instead, and it terrifies me." Harper stared at him, speechless. "I didn't expect this," he continued. "After Diane died, I thought that part of my life was over. I was focused on Emma, on surviving each day. Then you walked into that community center and something just shifted. Henry, You don't need to say anything right now," he assured her. "I know you're still healing from your marriage. I know trust is difficult. I just wanted to be honest about where I stand." Harper took a deep breath. "My ex-husband made me feel like I was lucky he chose me. Like I should be grateful someone like him would want someone like me." "That's not what this is," Henry said firmly. "I don't think you're lucky I'm interested. I think I'm fortunate to know you. Your intelligence, your resilience, your heart. The rest is just the rest." Tears pricked at Harper's eyes. "I think I need time." "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." True to his word, Henry didn't pressure her. Their friendship continued. Weekend outings with the girls became a regular occurrence, and Harper found herself looking forward to his texts throughout the day. Silly observations about his students, book recommendations, photos of Emma's latest achievements. Meanwhile, Tate's attempts to reinsert himself into Harper's personal life had finally ceased. He maintained his visiting schedule with Phoebe, but no longer tried to engage Harper in conversations about their past relationship or her current life choices. Something in his demeanor had shifted. A resignation, perhaps, or simply the recognition that his charm no longer worked on her. During his Sunday visits, Tate occasionally mentioned business difficulties, projects delayed, investors backing out, partnerships dissolved. Harper listened politely, but offered neither sympathy nor advice. "You seem different," Tate observed during one such exchange. "More confident." "I am different," Harper agreed. "Motherhood changes you. So does divorce." "Is there someone new?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. Harper considered denying it. Her relationship with Henry was still undefined, still unfolding, but she saw no reason to shield Tate from the truth. "I've met someone who respects me," she said simply, "who values me for exactly who I am." Something flickered across Tate's expression, regret perhaps, or simply surprise that she had moved on. He nodded once, then returned his attention to Phoebe. That evening, after Tate left and Phoebe was settled in her crib, Harper called Henry. "Are you free for dinner tomorrow night?" she asked. "Just us." The following evening, over pasta at a small Italian restaurant in the North End, Harper finally answered the question Henry had asked months earlier. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said, "and it terrifies me for all the same reasons." Henry's smile was worth every moment of fear she'd pushed through to speak those words. "So what do we do about it?" he asked. "Take it one day at a time? Figure it out together?" "I'd like that." As autumn painted Boston in brilliant reds and golds, Harper and Henry navigated the complexity of blending their lives. They introduced their daughters to extended family members, coordinated schedules for childcare and work commitments, and discovered the logistical challenges of dating with 2 babies under 2. They had their first argument over Emma's tendency to grab Phoebe's toys, a minor issue that escalated due to sleep deprivation and the stress of midterm grading for Henry. They weathered their first parenting crisis together when Phoebe developed a high fever that required an emergency room visit at 2 a.m. Through each challenge, Harper found herself constantly surprised by how different this relationship felt. Henry did not expect her to shrink herself, physically or emotionally, to fit his expectations. He did not treat her career as secondary to his own. He did not make her feel that his presence in her life was conditional on her meeting some impossible standard. "What are you thinking about?" Henry asked one evening as they sat on her apartment balcony, watching the sunset after the girls were asleep. "How much space I used to make myself take up," Harper replied. "With Tate, I was always trying to be smaller. Physically, yes, but also in other ways. Smaller opinions, smaller needs, smaller dreams." Henry took her hand. "And now? Now I'm learning to take up exactly the amount of space I'm meant to occupy. No more apologizing for existing as I am." The holiday season approached with its usual frenzy of preparations and expectations. Harper and Henry decided to host Thanksgiving together at her apartment, inviting their respective families to meet for the first time. The prospect was both exciting and anxiety-inducing. What if they don't get along? Harper fretted the night before as they prepped vegetables for stuffing. "Then we'll have dramatic holiday stories to tell the girls when they're older," Henry replied pragmatically. "But I think they'll be fine. They all have one important thing in common. What's that? They love our daughters, and they want us to be happy. The Thanksgiving gathering proved Henry right. His parents, retired teachers from Western Massachusetts, bonded with Harper's mother over their shared love of mystery novels. Harper's younger brother hit it off with Henry's sister, discovering a mutual passion for rock climbing. The girls were passed from lap to lap, soaking up the attention and love of their extended family members. By the time the dishes were cleared and the last guests departed, Harper felt a sense of rightness she hadn't expected. This mixed-up blended family they were creating felt authentic in a way her picture-perfect life with Tate never had. As she and Henry loaded the dishwasher in comfortable silence, he bumped her hip gently with his. "So that went well," Harper smiled. "Better than I expected. My mom wants to know if we're getting married," he said casually, rinsing a gravy boat. "I told her we're taking things at our own pace." Harper paused, a serving spoon halfway to the dishwasher. "Is that something you think about? Marriage?" Henry turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "I think about building a life with you and the girls, whatever form that takes. Even with all my baggage, my insecurities, my ex-husband who'll be in our lives forever because of Phoebe." "Harper," Henry said, taking her hands in his, "everyone has baggage. I come with grief and fear and a tendency to quote obscure poetry when I'm nervous. We're not perfect. We're just perfectly right for each other." In that moment, standing in her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their successful first holiday together, Harper felt the final pieces of her old self-doubt begin to crumble away. The woman Tate had made her believe she was, lucky to be chosen, grateful for scraps of affection, constantly striving to be worthy of love, no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, someone who knew her worth wasn't determined by her size or by a man's approval. Someone who understood that real love didn't require her to be less, but encouraged her to be more fully herself. As Henry pulled her into an embrace, Phoebe's babbling came through the monitor, soon joined by Emma's responding coos from the portable crib they'd set up in the nursery. "Our daughters are having a conversation," Harper laughed softly. "Probably plotting world domination," Henry suggested, "or discussing which stuffed animals are superior. Should we go check on them?" "In a minute," Henry said, tightening his arms around her. "I just want to hold on to this moment a little longer." Harper rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart and the distant sounds of their daughters babbling. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt completely, unreservedly at home. The February morning arrived with biting cold and news that sent shockwaves through Boston's business community. Harper was preparing Phoebe's breakfast when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Caldwell Development files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. She quickly scanned the article, absorbing the details with growing disbelief. Tate's company, once the crown jewel of Boston's real estate development scene, was collapsing under the weight of failed investments, abandoned projects, and mounting debt. The financial press, which had once heralded Tate as a visionary, now questioned his judgment and scrutinized past deals with unforgiving precision. Harper set down her phone, unsure how to feel. Tate's financial troubles weren't her concern, yet she couldn't help wondering how this would affect Phoebe. The child support payments had always arrived punctually, providing a financial cushion that allowed Harper to maintain their comfortable lifestyle. Her contemplation was interrupted by Phoebe banging her spoon enthusiastically against her high chair tray, demanding the oatmeal Harper had momentarily forgotten. "Sorry, sweetheart," Harper said, returning her attention to her daughter, now 18 months old and developing a determined personality that reminded Harper increasingly of herself. That afternoon, Tate texted to cancel his regular Wednesday visit, citing urgent business matters. Harper wasn't surprised. The bankruptcy filing would undoubtedly consume his attention, but she was concerned by his uncharacteristic brevity. Despite his flaws, Tate had been consistent in his commitment to Phoebe. Over the next 2 weeks, as more details of Caldwell Development's collapse emerged, Tate missed another visit, then failed to respond to Harper's messages about rescheduling. The promised child support payment didn't arrive on the 1st of the month. "Should I be worried?" Harper asked Henry as they prepared dinner together in his apartment, the girls playing contentedly in the living room within view. Henry considered the question carefully. "Financially, maybe start thinking about contingency plans, but I'm more concerned about Phoebe. She's young, but she's used to seeing him regularly. I can handle the financial part, Harper said, dicing onions with perhaps more force than necessary. I saved most of the divorce settlement. It's the emotional impact on Phoebe that worries me. Have you tried reaching out to any mutual friends who might know what's going on with him? Harper shook her head. Most of our mutual friends were always his friends. They vanished from my life after the divorce. 3 days later, Harper's concerns escalated when she received an email from Tate's attorney requesting a meeting to discuss modifications to the existing custody and support arrangements in light of changed circumstances. He's going to try to reduce his financial obligations, Harper's lawyer Catherine confirmed during a hasty phone consultation. It's standard procedure in bankruptcy situations. Can he do that? The court may grant some temporary relief, but child support obligations are considered priority debts. They don't disappear in bankruptcy. Catherine's voice was reassuring but cautious. We should meet before you see them. There may be more to this than financial adjustments. Catherine's instincts proved correct. At the meeting in her office the following day, Tate's attorney presented not only a request for reduced child support payments, but also a proposal for increased physical custody. My client is relocating to Chicago to pursue new business opportunities, the attorney explained. He requests that Phoebe spend summers and alternate holidays with him once she reaches school age. Chicago? Harper repeated, stunned. When did this happen? Mr. Caldwell has accepted a position with Meridian Partners, starting next month. Catherine intervened smoothly. We'll need time to review these proposals. In the meantime, my client expects immediate payment of the overdue support and a commitment to maintaining the existing visitation schedule until any new arrangement is formalized. Tate's attorney nodded curtly. I'll convey your concerns. After the lawyers departed, Harper remained in Catherine's office, processing the implications. He's running away, she said finally. His company fails, his reputation is damaged, so he's starting over somewhere new. And wants to take Phoebe with him part of the year, Catherine added, which complicates things considerably. I won't let that happen, Harper said firmly. Not unless I'm convinced it's in her best interest. Later that evening, as Harper described the meeting to Henry, her phone rang with Tate's number. I should take this, she said, stepping away from their dinner preparation. Maybe he'll actually explain himself. Tate's voice sounded strained when she answered. Can we talk, in person? Your lawyer did plenty of talking today. This isn't about lawyers. It's about our daughter. Harper hesitated, then agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near her apartment the following afternoon. She chose a public location deliberately, wanting to avoid both the intimacy of her home and the formality of an office setting. Tate arrived 15 minutes late, looking nothing like the polished businessman Harper had known. His hair was slightly unkempt, his designer suit replaced by jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. The confident swagger was gone, his shoulders slightly hunched as he slid into the seat across from her. Thank you for meeting me, he began, his voice subdued. What's going on, Tate? Chicago reduced support? Increased custody after barely seeing Phoebe for weeks? He stared into his coffee. Everything's falling apart, Harper. The bankruptcy is just the beginning. There are investigations, lawsuits from investors. I need a fresh start. And Phoebe is suddenly part of that fresh start? After you've missed visits and stopped sending support? Tate's expression hardened slightly. I've been a good father. I've never missed a payment until now. Money isn't parenting, Harper countered. And your timing is suspicious. You ignore Phoebe for weeks, then suddenly want her for summers and holidays. I want her because she's my daughter, Tate snapped, loud enough that nearby patrons glanced over. He lowered his voice, leaning forward. Look, the Meridian job is a lifeline. I need to take it. But I don't want to lose Phoebe. You should have thought of that before accepting a position 1,000 miles away without discussing it with me first. Tate's eyes narrowed. Is this about your new boyfriend? You're worried about sharing Phoebe with me because it complicates your perfect new family? The accusation stung, partly because Harper had indeed been considering how Tate's proposal would impact their evolving family dynamic with Henry and Emma. This is about Phoebe's well-being, she replied evenly. About consistency and stability for a child who's not even 2 years old. She needs her father? She does, but shipping her across the country for months at a time isn't the answer. Tate ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. What do you want from me, Harper? I'm trying to do the right thing here. Are you? Or are you trying to rebuild your ego after your professional failure by exerting control over the one relationship where you still have leverage? The words hit their mark. Tate recoiled slightly, then leaned forward again, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think you've got it all figured out now, don't you? The devoted boyfriend, the cozy little family you're creating. But you should know something about your perfect Professor Armstrong. Harper felt her stomach drop. What are you talking about? I had him checked out. Standard precaution given his access to our daughter. Tate pulled out his phone, opening an email. His wife's death wasn't as simple as he's led you to believe. Stop it, Harper said, revulsion rising in her throat. You investigated Henry. There were questions about her medical care, about decisions he made as her healthcare proxy. The hospital review board. Enough! Harper stood abruptly, gathering her coat. This is a new low even for you. I'm not listening to your desperate attempts to sabotage my relationship. Tate grabbed her wrist. Harper, wait, there's more you need to know. She yanked her arm away. The only thing I need to know is that you're willing to play unimaginably dirty to get what you want. Stay away from me, and stay away from Henry. What about Phoebe? We'll handle custody arrangements through our lawyers. Outside, Harper walked briskly through the cold, trying to process what had just happened. Tate had always been manipulative, but this level of vindictiveness was shocking. Yet beneath her anger lurked a seed of doubt. What if there was some truth to his insinuations about Henry? She shook her head, dispelling the thought. This was exactly what Tate wanted, to plant suspicion, to destabilize her happiness. She wouldn't give him that power. That evening, after putting Phoebe to bed, Harper sat Henry down in her living room. I met with Tate today, she began, watching his expression carefully. He's moving to Chicago and wants Phoebe to spend summers with him when she's older. Henry nodded thoughtfully. That would be difficult but not impossible to navigate. There's more. Harper took a deep breath. He said he investigated you. He made allegations about Diane's death, about hospital reviews. Henry went completely still, his face draining of color. He what? He tried to make me believe there was something suspicious about the medical decisions you made when Diane died. Henry stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room. I can't believe he would... He stopped, turning to face her. Do you believe him? The question hung between them, weighted with significance. Harper chose her words carefully. I believe he'd say anything to get what he wants. But I also believe relationships need honesty. She met his eyes directly. Was there anything unusual about Diane's death that I should know about? Henry sat back down heavily, his shoulders slumped. There was a hospital review. Standard procedure when a young, healthy patient dies unexpectedly. Harper's heart sank. Why didn't you tell me? Because it was the worst moment of my life, and the review made it even more painful. His voice cracked slightly. Diane had an advance directive. No extraordinary measures if the baby could be saved. When the abruption happened, everything moved so fast. The doctors gave me choices no one should ever have to make. Harper reached for his hand. I'm so sorry. The review found no wrongdoing by anyone. Just a tragedy with impossible decisions. Henry looked up, his eyes haunted. But the fact that your ex would use that against me, would try to twist the worst day of my life into some kind of weapon. That's who he is, Harper said softly. He finds vulnerabilities and exploits them. They sat in silence for a moment, processing the enormity of Tate's intrusion into their lives. What now? Henry finally asked. Now I fight. For Phoebe. For our peace. For boundaries that Tate can't cross. The following week brought an unexpected development. Harper arrived at work to find an email from someone named Jordan Ellis, with the subject line, Tate Caldwell, information you should have. Her finger hovered over the delete button, assuming it was spam or possibly another of Tate's manipulation tactics. Curiosity won out, and she opened it to find a carefully worded message. Ms. Westbrook, we haven't met, but I worked as CFO at Caldwell Development until recently. Before you make any custody decisions regarding your daughter, you should be aware of certain financial irregularities that prompted my resignation. Mr. Caldwell's bankruptcy filing doesn't tell the complete story. I have documentation you may find relevant. I can meet discreetly if you're interested. Harper forwarded the email to Catherine asking for advice. The response came quickly. Worth exploring. My office tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll arrange security. Jordan Ellis turned out to be a precise, methodical woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the careful manner of someone accustomed to handling sensitive information. She brought a leather portfolio containing numerous financial documents, which she laid out systematically on Catherine's conference table. Mr. Caldwell's financial difficulties didn't begin with recent failed projects, she explained. For at least 3 years, he's been moving money between accounts, misrepresenting assets to investors, and commingling personal and business funds. Harper shook her head. I don't understand what this has to do with custody arrangements. Jordan removed a final document from her portfolio. This is a contract for the purchase of a condo in Buenos Aires, signed last month. Argentina has no extradition treaty with the United States for financial crimes. Catherine leaned forward, suddenly alert. You're suggesting he's planning to flee the country? The SEC investigation is further along than publicly known. Indictments are likely within months. Jordan turned to Harper. I believe Mr. Caldwell's Chicago position is a misdirection. Once he has your daughter with him for an extended period, I fear he may take her to Argentina instead. The room seemed to tilt slightly as Harper absorbed this information. He would kidnap Phoebe? He's facing potential prison time, Ms. Westbrook. Desperate people make desperate choices. Harper and Catherine exchanged glances, the implications clear. This wasn't just about custody schedules or support payments anymore. This was about protecting Phoebe from a father whose life was imploding and who might see her as his only remaining asset. After Jordan left, promising to make herself available for any legal proceedings, Catherine outlined their options. We file for an emergency custody order restricting Tate from taking Phoebe out of state. We provide copies of these documents to the prosecutor's office handling the SEC investigation, and we prepare for Tate to fight back hard. Do it, Harper said without hesitation. All of it. The legal battle that followed was swift and brutal. Tate, cornered by the evidence Jordan had provided, escalated his attacks on Harper's character, parenting, and relationship with Henry. He hired an aggressive new attorney who specialized in high-conflict custody cases and filed motions alleging parental alienation. Throughout it all, Henry remained steadfast. Even when Tate's legal team subpoenaed his medical records and Diane's death certificate in a transparent attempt to intimidate him. He can't hurt me with the truth, Henry told Harper one night as they reviewed the latest legal filings. And he can't hurt us unless we let him. The final confrontation came on a rainy April morning in the judge's chambers. Tate, looking haggard after weeks of legal skirmishes and media scrutiny, sat across from Harper with their respective attorneys flanking them. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Harriman began, I've reviewed the financial evidence submitted by Ms. Westbrook's counsel, as well as the documentation regarding your property purchase in Argentina. I find it deeply troubling. Tate shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, that property was an investment opportunity, nothing more. An undisclosed investment made while filing for bankruptcy protection? The judge raised an eyebrow. That alone raises serious questions about your judgment. The judge turned to Harper. Ms. Westbrook, your concern for your daughter's safety appears well-founded. I'm granting the emergency custody order and imposing additional safeguards. Relief washed over Harper as the judge outlined the terms. Tate's visitation would be supervised until the completion of the SEC investigation. His passport would be surrendered to the court. Any travel with Phoebe would require explicit court approval with significant advance notice. As they prepared to leave the chambers, Tate approached Harper, his expression unreadable. You've won, he said quietly. Are you happy now? Harper met his gaze evenly. This isn't about winning, Tate. It's about protecting our daughter. I would never hurt Phoebe. Not intentionally, perhaps, but you were willing to uproot her life to save yourself. That's reason enough for these precautions. Tate's facade finally cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. Everything's falling apart, Harper. The business, my reputation, and now this. I'm facing prison time. For a moment, Harper felt a flicker of pity. Despite everything, Tate was Phoebe's father. His downfall would eventually affect her too. Get help, Tate, she said gently. Real help, not just another scheme. For Phoebe's sake, if not your own. Something shifted in his expression, a momentary glimpse of the man she'd once believed him to be. Then it vanished, replaced by the calculating look she'd come to recognize all too well. This isn't over, he said, his voice hardening. You've underestimated me before. Before Harper could respond, Catherine appeared at her side, guiding her away from Tate and toward the exit. Outside the courthouse, rain fell in sheets, but Harper felt lighter than she had in months. Tate's threats no longer held power over her. The court had recognized the danger he posed. Most importantly, Phoebe was safe. Henry waited under an umbrella at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Emma balanced on his hip. When he saw Harper emerge, his face broke into a relieved smile. "It went well?" he called over the sound of rainfall. Harper nodded, joining them under the umbrella's shelter. "Better than expected. The judge granted everything we asked for." Henry shifted Emma to one arm so he could embrace Harper with the other. "I never doubted you." As they walked toward the parking garage, Harper realized something fundamental had changed within her. The woman who had once feared Tate's disapproval, who had measured herself against impossible standards, who had believed herself lucky to be chosen, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who understood that love shouldn't require diminishment, that partnerships should elevate rather than constrain, that her worth was inherent and not dependent on anyone else's validation. "What are you thinking about?" Henry asked as they reached the car. Harper smiled, watching the rain wash down the windows, cleansing everything in its path. "I'm thinking that sometimes you have to weather the storm to find clear skies." As Henry buckled Emma into her car seat, Harper's phone chimed with a news alert. She glanced down, then froze, reading the headline twice to be sure she understood. "Breaking. Tate Caldwell, arrested by federal agents following court appearance. Charges include fraud, money laundering, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution." "Harper." Henry touched her arm, concern in his voice. "What is it?" She handed him the phone wordlessly, watching as he absorbed the information. "The SEC must have been waiting for him," Henry said. "They probably knew he'd try to run after the custody ruling." Harper nodded, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. The final piece of Tate's careful facade had crumbled, revealing the truth she'd glimpsed but never fully acknowledged during their marriage. Beneath the charm and confidence lay a man willing to deceive everyone, including himself, to maintain the illusion of success. "Are you okay?" Henry asked gently. Harper looked at their daughters, both watching the rain with fascination from their car seats, then back at Henry, whose steady presence had become her true north in the chaos of the past year. "Yes," she said, and meant it. "I'm finally free." The Boston Globe's headline dominated Harper's newsfeed for days. "Real estate mogul Tate Caldwell facing 20-plus years for fraud scheme." Each article detailed new allegations as investigators unraveled the complex web of financial deceptions he had constructed over the years. Former business partners came forward with stories of falsified documents and broken promises. Investors described being charmed into backing projects built on fabricated projections. Behind Tate's charismatic public image had lurked a sophisticated con artist who believed rules applied to everyone but himself. Harper read each article with a strange detachment, as if they described someone she had never really known. In many ways, that was true. The Tate she had married, or thought she had married, was as much a carefully crafted fiction as his business presentations had been. In the aftermath of his arrest, Phoebe became Harper's primary concern. Though not yet 2 years old, the little girl had grown accustomed to her father's weekly visits. How would she process his sudden absence? What would Harper tell her when she was old enough to understand? "Children are remarkably adaptable," Dr. Lewis assured her during a therapy session. "At this age, Phoebe will respond more to your emotional state than to Tate's absence. If you're stable and present, she'll feel secure regardless of the circumstances." That advice became Harper's mantra in the weeks following Tate's arrest. As she navigated the practical and emotional fallout, she established a consistent routine for Phoebe, surrounded her with love and stimulation, and tried to shield her from the tension that occasionally seeped through Harper's carefully maintained composure. 6 weeks after his arrest, Tate requested a meeting with Harper at the detention center, where he awaited trial. Catherine advised against it, but Harper ultimately decided to go, hoping for closure if nothing else. The visiting room was stark and institutional, a painful contrast to the luxurious environments Tate had always cultivated around himself. He sat at a metal table, wearing a beige jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. Without his designer suits and carefully maintained appearance, he looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Thank you for coming," he said, as Harper took the seat across from him. "How's Phoebe?" "She's thriving," Harper replied, keeping her voice neutral. "She started swimming lessons last month. She loves the water." A flash of pain crossed Tate's face. I was teaching her to swim. You took her to the pool twice. Tate looked away, acknowledging the truth of her statement with a slight nod. I'm not going to contest custody, he said after a moment. My lawyers think it would help my case to fight for parental rights, to appear family-oriented to the jury, but I won't use her that way. The admission surprised Harper. It was perhaps the first genuinely selfless decision she had ever witnessed from him. Thank you, she said simply. I've accepted a plea deal, Tate continued. 15 years with possibility of parole after 10. No trial. Harper absorbed this information silently. 15 years. Phoebe would be a teenager by the time Tate was released. Why did you want to see me? She finally asked. Tate leaned forward slightly. I wanted to apologize, not just for the end, but for all of it. For making you believe you weren't enough. For treating you like an accessory instead of a partner. For the affairs, the lies. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. I've had a lot of time to think in here, about who I've been, the choices I've made. Harper studied him, searching for the manipulation she had come to expect. To her surprise, she found none, only a weary resignation and what appeared to be genuine remorse. Why now? She asked. You had years to treat me with respect, to be honest, to be faithful. Because I never had to face consequences before, Tate admitted. I always found a way out, a new angle, another chance. But there's no escaping this. He gestured to their surroundings. No charm or connections or money to make it disappear. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history settling between them. I'd like to write to Phoebe, Tate said eventually. When she's older. Send birthday cards maybe. I don't expect to be a real father to her, I've lost that right. But I want her to know I exist, that I think about her. Harper considered his request. Her instinct was to protect Phoebe from the potential disappointment of a father who might lose interest once the novelty wore off. Yet completely cutting Tate out of Phoebe's life seemed equally problematic. Letters and cards are reasonable, she said finally, but I'll read them first. And if they stop coming, if you get busy or distracted and forget about her for months, then it stops permanently. I won't let her be hurt by inconsistency. Tate nodded, accepting her terms. There's one more thing. He hesitated, then continued. The investigators froze most of my assets, but there's a trust fund my grandfather established. It can't be touched by creditors or the courts. I've instructed my attorneys to transfer it to Phoebe for her education. Harper frowned. I don't want your money, Tate. It's not for you. It's for her. Please, Harper, let me do this one thing right. After careful consideration, Harper agreed. The trust would be managed by a neutral third party until Phoebe turned 18, ensuring Tate couldn't use it as leverage. As their meeting ended and guards prepared to escort Tate back to his cell, he asked one final question. Are you happy? With Armstrong? Harper paused, considering her answer. Henry treats me with respect and genuine affection. He values me exactly as I am. So yes, I'm happy. Tate nodded slowly. Good. You deserve that. Walking out of the detention center into the bright spring sunshine, Harper felt an unexpected lightness. The conversation hadn't erased the pain Tate had caused, but it had provided something she hadn't realized she needed. Acknowledgement. For perhaps the first time Tate had seen her, truly seen her, without the filter of his own desires and expectations. That evening, as she recounted the meeting to Henry over dinner after the girls were in bed, he listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions without judgment. Do you believe he's genuinely changed? He asked when she finished. Harper considered the question. I think he's at the beginning of a long process. Prison has forced him to face reality in ways he's always avoided. Whether that leads to lasting change, she shrugged. Time will tell. And how do you feel about it all? Relieved, Harper said after a moment. Not because he's suffering, I don't wish that on him, but because the uncertainty is over. We can move forward without wondering what scheme he's planning next, or how he might try to disrupt our lives. Henry reached across the table, taking her hand. Forward sounds good. Moving forward took many forms in the months that followed. For Harper, it meant continuing her therapy sessions, processing not only the trauma of Tate's betrayal and arrest, but also the subtle ways their relationship had shaped her self-perception. She worked through her lingering insecurities about her body, her worth, her place in the world. Professionally, Harper found new purpose when Elaine approached her with an unexpected opportunity. "I'm launching a new imprint focused on diverse voices in children's literature," Elaine explained during a lunch meeting. "I want you to lead it." Harper stared at her in surprise. "Me? Why not someone with more management experience?" "Because you have vision, Harper. You've been advocating for these books for years. You understand why representation matters. The rest can be learned." The offer was both thrilling and intimidating. Leading the new imprint, which would be called Kaleidoscope Books, meant stepping into a more visible role, managing a small team, and having greater input on acquisition decisions. It also meant increased responsibility and public speaking, something that still triggered Harper's anxiety. "Take the weekend to think about it," Elaine suggested, noting Harper's hesitation. That evening, as she discussed the opportunity with Henry, Harper found herself listing all the reasons she might fail. "I've never managed people before," she fretted. "And the industry events, the presentations to the sales team, the author negotiations, all things you're entirely capable of learning," Henry interjected gently. "But the question isn't whether you can do it. It's whether you want to." Harper paused, considering his point. "I do want it. I believe in what Kaleidoscope could become, the books we could publish, the children who might see themselves in stories for the first time. Then the rest is just logistics," Henry said with a confidence that bolstered her own. "And you won't be doing it alone." Harper accepted the position the following Monday. The learning curve was steep, but exhilarating. She threw herself into building Kaleidoscope's identity, recruiting a diverse team of editors who shared her passion, and developing a launch list that would showcase the imprint's mission. There were stumbles along the way. Her first acquisition meeting with the executive board went poorly when she became flustered by aggressive questioning about sales projections. A promising author chose another publisher after Harper misjudged their creative differences. The design team pushed back on her vision for the imprint's branding. Each setback tested Harper's resolve, triggering echoes of the self-doubt she had worked so hard to overcome. But unlike in her marriage to Tate, where failures were met with subtle disapproval or disappointment, these professional challenges became opportunities for growth. "Publishing is a series of educated guesses," Elaine advised after a particularly difficult meeting. "Even the veterans get it wrong half the time. The key is learning from each misstep and moving forward." 6 months into her new role, Harper stood nervously backstage at Book Expo America, preparing to unveil Kaleidoscope Books to the industry. Henry had traveled with her to Chicago for moral support, caring for both girls in the hotel while Harper attended the convention. "You're going to be amazing," he had assured her that morning, straightening the lapel of her new blazer. "Just remember why you're doing this." Now, as the moderator announced her name, Harper touched the small photo of Phoebe tucked into her notebook and walked onto the stage. Looking out at the audience of booksellers, librarians, and industry professionals, she took a deep breath and began. "When I was growing up, I never saw characters in books who looked like me," she said, her voice initially soft but growing stronger. "As a plus-size girl, I learned early that bodies like mine were only included as the before picture, the comic relief or the cautionary tale, never the hero, never the one who got the happy ending." She gestured to the screen behind her, where the Kaleidoscope logo appeared alongside cover images from their first list of titles. "At Kaleidoscope, we believe every child deserves to be the hero of their own story. Our books celebrate diversity in all its forms: race, culture, ability, body size, family structure, gender expression, because representation isn't just a buzzword, it's a lifeline." As Harper continued her presentation, she felt something shifting within her, a final shedding of the woman who had once made herself small to accommodate Tate's expectations. In her place stood someone confident, passionate, and unapologetically herself. The presentation was met with enthusiastic applause and a flood of interview requests. By the time Harper returned to the hotel that evening, exhausted but elated, several of Kaleidoscope's titles had already generated significant pre-publication buzz. "You did it," Henry said, greeting her with a warm embrace. "I knew you would." "We should celebrate," Harper suggested, kicking off her shoes. "There's that restaurant in the hotel that's supposed to be amazing." Henry hesitated, an odd expression crossing his face. "Actually, I had something else in mind." He led her to the suite's dining area, where he had arranged a private dinner complete with candles, flowers, and a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. The girls were already asleep in the connecting room, baby monitors placed strategically on the table. "When did you do all this?" Harper asked, amazed. I had help from room service, Henry admitted. Sit, please. There's something I want to discuss with you. As they enjoyed the meal Henry had arranged, he seemed unusually nervous, checking his phone repeatedly and glancing toward the suite's entrance. Is everything okay? Harper finally asked. You seem distracted. Henry set down his fork, reaching across the table to take her hand. I'm about to do something terrifying, and I need you to be patient with me. Before Harper could respond, a soft knock sounded at the door. Henry jumped up to answer it, returning a moment later with a small, elegantly wrapped package. This is for you, he said, placing it in front of Harper. She opened it curiously to find a beautiful leather-bound journal. Embossed on the cover in gold lettering were the words, Our Story. Open it, Henry urged softly. Inside, Harper found page after page of Henry's distinctive handwriting. The first entry was dated exactly 1 year earlier, the day they had met at the single parents support group. May 15th, met a woman named Harper today. She looked as terrified as I felt last winter when I first attended the group. Brought cookies as a social buffer. She laughed and the sound changed something in the room. In me, perhaps. First real laugh I've heard myself produce in a very long time. Harper looked up, tears welling in her eyes. You've been journaling about us for a year? Henry nodded. Every significant moment. The first time the girls played together. Our first real date. The first time you called me in the middle of the night because Phoebe had a fever and you were scared. Harper flipped through the pages, absorbing snippets of their shared history through Henry's perspective. His observations were thoughtful, sometimes poetic, capturing moments both profound and mundane with equal reverence. The final entry, dated that morning, read simply, Today I ask Harper to marry me. Harper's breath caught as she read the words. She looked up to find Henry kneeling beside her chair, a small velvet box in his hand. This isn't about completing us, he said softly. We're already whole people with full lives. It's about choosing to share those lives officially, to build something new together with Emma and Phoebe. He opened the box, revealing a unique ring with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds. Harper Westbrook, I love your brilliant mind, your generous heart, your unwavering strength. I love the way you challenge me, support me, and make me laugh. Will you marry me? Through tears of joy, Harper nodded. Yes, absolutely yes. As Henry slipped the ring onto her finger, she marveled at how different this moment felt from Tate's proposal years earlier. That had been a fairy tale, all surface charm and romantic gestures. This was deeper, richer, rooted in genuine knowledge of each other and mutual respect. I have one condition, Harper said as they embraced. Henry pulled back slightly, eyebrows raised in question. I'm keeping my name professionally, she continued. Kaleidoscope is just getting established, and I want to maintain that identity. Of course, Henry agreed immediately. We can figure out what makes sense for our family. Hyphenate, keep separate names, whatever works for us. His easy acceptance of her autonomy, so different from the subtle control Tate had always exerted, reinforced Harper's certainty that she was making the right choice. 2 weeks after returning from Chicago, Harper and Henry gathered their closest friends and family for an engagement dinner. As Leona raised a toast to the happy couple, Harper looked around the table at the community they had built. Henry's parents, who had embraced her and Phoebe with genuine warmth, her mother and brother, who had supported her through the darkest days of her divorce, colleagues from Bright House who had become true friends, parents from their support group who understood the unique challenges they faced. This was family, Harper realized, not defined by blood or legal documents, but by choice, by love, by showing up for each other consistently and authentically. The wedding planning proceeded with minimal drama, a welcome contrast to the elaborate production her first marriage had been. They chose a date the following spring, allowing plenty of time to arrange details while keeping the event intimate and meaningful. What about Tate? Henry asked one evening as they reviewed their guest list. Will you tell him about our engagement? Harper considered the question. After their meeting at the detention center, Tate had begun sending monthly letters addressed to Phoebe, which Harper dutifully stored in a keepsake box for when her daughter was older. The letters were surprisingly thoughtful, often including simple sketches or stories about Tate's childhood. I'll mention it in my next update about Phoebe, she decided. Not because his opinion matters, but because transparency seems healthiest for everyone involved. When Harper wrote to Tate the following week, she included a brief note about her engagement along with the usual updates about Phoebe's development. His response came faster than usual, a short letter addressed directly to Harper rather than their daughter. "Congratulations on your engagement," he wrote. "Armstrong is a fortunate man, and I trust he knows it. Please tell Phoebe that her father continues to think of her daily and looks forward to the day when she's old enough to read these letters herself." The letter contained no bitterness, no manipulation, no undercurrent of possessiveness. Perhaps, Harper thought, Tate was indeed finding his way toward genuine change. As summer turned to fall, Kaleidoscope Books prepared for its official launch. The first titles would hit shelves in October, and early reviews had been overwhelmingly positive. Harper's days were filled with last-minute marketing decisions, author events, and press interviews. At home, she and Henry juggled their increasingly complex schedules, tag-teaming childcare and household responsibilities. They had decided to sell both of their apartments and purchase a house together in Cambridge, a Victorian with a fenced yard where the girls could play and enough bedrooms for their growing family. Moving day arrived on a crisp October morning, with friends pitching in to help transport furniture and boxes from their respective apartments to the new house. As Harper directed traffic in the organized chaos, her phone rang with a call from Catherine. "I just received interesting news," her lawyer said without preamble. "Tate is being transferred to a minimum security facility in Western Massachusetts next month. His cooperation with investigators has earned him some privileges." Harper absorbed this information, unsure how to feel. The move would place Tate much closer to Boston than his current facility in Pennsylvania. "Has he requested any changes to our agreement?" she asked cautiously. "No, and that's what makes this interesting," Catherine replied. "The transfer would allow more frequent visitation options, but he hasn't filed any motions to modify the current arrangement. I thought you should know, given your upcoming wedding and move." After the call, Harper found Henry unpacking books in what would become their shared home office. "Tate's being transferred to Massachusetts," she informed him, sitting on a nearby moving box. "Catherine thinks it's unusual that he hasn't requested changes to our visitation agreement given the proximity." Henry considered this, shelving a volume of poetry before responding. "What do you think it means?" "I think—" Harper paused, organizing her thoughts. "I think he meant what he said about not wanting to disrupt Phoebe's life. Maybe he's actually respecting the boundaries we've established. How do you feel about him being closer?" Harper reflected on the question, surprised to find herself relatively calm about the development. "A year ago I would have been anxious, worried about what scheme he was planning. Now it just feels like another piece of information to process." Henry smiled, crossing the room to sit beside her. "That's growth." The house gradually transformed from an empty shell to a home filled with the combined treasures of their separate lives. Harper's collection of first-edition children's books found a place of honor in the living room. Henry's grandfather's antique desk became the centerpiece of their shared office. Emma and Phoebe's toys mingled in the playroom, their distinct personalities reflected in their choices. Emma's artistic supplies alongside Phoebe's building blocks and toy animals. In November, Kaleidoscope Books officially launched with a celebration at a historic Boston bookstore. Harper's team had transformed the space into a kaleidoscope of colors, with each of their inaugural titles featured in creative displays. Children from local schools attended, participating in readings and activities based on the new books. As Harper prepared to address the gathered crowd, she spotted Henry entering with both girls, now close friends, despite their different temperaments. He gave her an encouraging thumbs up before settling the children in the front row. "Welcome to the birth of Kaleidoscope Books," Harper began, her voice strong and confident. "Today we celebrate not just the launch of a new imprint, but the beginning of a conversation about who deserves to see themselves in stories." Later, as the event wound down and the last guests departed, Harper found a quiet moment to observe what they had built, both professionally and personally. Her team chatted animatedly with booksellers, flush with the success of the launch. Henry supervised the girls as they explored the children's section, Emma reading a picture book to an attentive Phoebe. Elaine appeared at Harper's side, following her gaze. "You've done remarkable work here, Harper, not just with Kaleidoscope, but with your life." Harper smiled, accepting the compliment without deflection, another small victory in her ongoing journey towards self-acceptance. "Thank you for believing in me," she replied, "for seeing potential I couldn't always see in myself." As they prepared to leave, Harper gathered the people she loved most, Henry, the girls, Leona, and the small team who had helped bring Kaleidoscope to life. "Dinner at our place," she announced, to celebrate properly. Our place. The words felt right on her tongue, solid and true in a way her life with Tate never had, despite all the trappings of success. This was something authentic, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than appearances or expectations. At home, surrounded by moving boxes and half-assembled furniture, they toasted with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for the children. Harper looked around at the mismatched chairs, the improvised dinner served on paper plates, the genuine joy on every face, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. This was not the life she had envisioned when she married Tate. It was messier, more complicated, less picture-perfect, and infinitely more real. As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Henry found Harper sitting on the porch swing they had installed that morning, gazing at the stars visible above the Cambridge rooftops. "Happy?" he asked, joining her on the swing. Harper leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Content," she corrected, "which is better than happy. More lasting." "How so?" "Happiness comes and goes. It's a feeling, a response to circumstances. Contentment is deeper. It's knowing your place in the world, appreciating what you have while still moving forward." Henry nodded, understanding as he always did. "And do you know your place in the world now?" Harper considered the question, thinking about all she had gained and lost, learned and unlearned over the past 2 years. She thought about the woman she had been, insecure, seeking validation from a man who could never truly provide it, and the woman she had become, confident in her worth, certain of her path, no longer diminishing herself to fit others' expectations. "I do," she said finally. "It's right here." 5 years later. "Mom, Emma won't let me use the purple marker. She's had it for 20 minutes already." Harper looked up from her manuscript review, exchanging an amused glance with Henry across their sun-drenched kitchen. Saturday mornings in the Armstrong-Westbrook household were always lively, with 7-year-old Phoebe and 8-year-old Emma engaged in their latest creative project. "Purple is a shared color," Harper called back. "5 more minutes, Emma, and then it's Phoebe's turn." Henry slid a fresh cup of coffee toward her. "The diplomatic skills you've developed would impress the United Nations." "All part of the job description," Harper replied with a smile. "Though I'm pretty sure marker mediator wasn't in the marriage vows." 3 years into their marriage, Harper and Henry had established a rhythm that worked for their blended family. The Victorian house in Cambridge had become truly theirs, filled with books, art, music, and the organized chaos that accompanied raising 2 spirited girls. Harper closed her laptop, stretching her arms above her head. At 37, she had grown into herself in ways she'd never imagined possible during her darkest days. Her body, the source of so much anguish during her years with Tate, was now simply the vessel that carried her through life, neither overvalued nor denigrated. She dressed in clothes that made her feel comfortable and confident, exercised because it energized her, rather than to shrink herself, and rarely gave a second thought to what others might think of her appearance. As executive director of Kaleidoscope Books, Harper had transformed the once fledgling imprint into a respected force in children's publishing. Their titles regularly appeared on award lists, and their commitment to diverse representation had inspired similar initiatives throughout the industry. Just last month, Harper had been invited to deliver the keynote address at the American Library Association's annual conference, a recognition that still felt surreal. Henry, now chair of his university's literature department, caught her eye again and nodded toward the front hallway. "It's almost time." Harper nodded, feeling the familiar mix of emotions that accompanied these visits. "Phoebe," she called, "remember what day it is?" Their daughter appeared in the doorway, purple marker triumphantly in hand. "Daddy Day," she announced, her honey-colored eyes so like Harper's own lighting up. "That's right, go get your backpack ready, okay? He'll be here in 20 minutes. As Phoebe scampered off, Emma following close behind to help, Henry moved to stand behind Harper, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "You good?" he asked softly. Harper covered his hand with her own. "I'm fine. It's gotten easier." Tate Caldwell had been released from prison 8 months earlier, after serving 5 years of his sentence. His exemplary behavior and cooperation with federal investigators had earned him an early release, complete with parole restrictions and community service requirements. His re-entry into Phoebe's life had been carefully orchestrated, beginning with supervised visits at a family center, then progressing to day outings. Today would be his first full day alone with Phoebe, a milestone that had required countless discussions between Harper, Henry, Tate, and their respective attorneys to arrange. The doorbell rang precisely at 10 o'clock. Harper opened it to find Tate standing on their porch, a small gift bag in his hand. Prison had aged him visibly. His once dark hair was now generously streaked with grey, and fine lines fanned from the corners of his eyes. Yet the most striking change was in his demeanour. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet thoughtfulness that still surprised Harper whenever they interacted. "Good morning," he said. "Beautiful day for the aquarium." "Phoebe's excited," Harper replied, stepping back to let him enter. "She's been talking about the penguin exhibit all week." Tate nodded, his eyes moving past Harper to where Henry stood in the hallway. The two men exchanged cordial nods, not friends, but no longer adversaries. They had reached an understanding rooted in their shared concern for Phoebe's well-being. "Daddy!" Phoebe flew down the stairs, Emma right behind her. She launched herself at Tate, who caught her in a careful embrace. "There's my girl," he said, his voice softening with genuine affection. "Ready for our adventure?" As Harper watched them interact, she marveled at how life had unfolded in ways none of them could have predicted. Tate, who had once been capable of such calculated cruelty, had emerged from prison with what appeared to be genuine remorse and a desire to be a positive presence in his daughter's life. He attended parenting classes voluntarily, consulted with a therapist before each visit, and respected the boundaries Harper and Henry established without complaint. After reviewing the day's schedule and exchanging contact information, Harper stood on the porch with Henry, watching as Tate helped Phoebe buckle into his modest sedan, a far cry from the luxury vehicles he'd once collected. "Do you ever wonder if he's acting?" Henry asked quietly as the car pulled away. Harper considered the question. "Sometimes. Old habits die hard, and Tate was always talented at presenting whatever version of himself was most advantageous. But I don't think so. Not anymore." She turned to face her husband. Prison broke something in him. His illusions about himself, maybe. Whatever it was, I think the change is real. They spent the day enjoying rare one-on-one time with Emma, taking her to a pottery class she'd been requesting for months. By the time they returned home, laden with misshapen clay creations, Tate had texted to say they were on their way back. When Phoebe bounded through the door, chattering excitedly about penguins and sea turtles, Harper noticed something in her hand, a small, leather-bound notebook. "Daddy got me a journal," she announced proudly. "He said it's for writing down important things so I remember them forever." Harper glanced at Tate, who stood in the doorway looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I hope that's okay," he said. "I remember you always kept journals." The thoughtful gesture, one that connected Phoebe to Harper rather than attempting to create a separate relationship, touched her unexpectedly. "It's perfect," she assured him. "She's been writing little stories for months now." After Tate departed with promises to call midweek, the family settled into their evening routine. As Harper tucked Phoebe into bed, her daughter asked the question Harper had been anticipating for years. "Mum, why don't you and Daddy live together like my friend's parents?" Harper sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people love each other but discover they aren't good partners. Your daddy and I realized we were better at being your parents separately than we were at being married to each other." Phoebe considered this, her expression serious. "Was it because he did bad things and went to prison?" "That came later," Harper explained. "But yes, your father made some serious mistakes. He's worked very hard to learn from them and become a better person. Like when I broke Emma's bracelet and had to make her a new one." Harper smiled at the simple comparison. "Something like that, but on a grown-up scale. The important thing for you to know is that both your daddy and I love you very much, and so do Henry and Emma. You have a big circle of people who care about you." Phoebe seemed satisfied with this answer, snuggling deeper under her covers. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart, more than all the stars in the sky." Later that evening, after both girls were asleep, Harper found herself drawn to the small home office she shared with Henry. From the bottom drawer of her desk, she retrieved a worn leather journal, the one she'd kept during the darkest days of her separation from Tate. She hadn't opened it in years, but tonight, something compelled her to revisit the words she'd written when her world was collapsing. Turning to a dog-eared page, she found the quote she'd penned during those sleepless nights of early motherhood and fresh heartbreak. "Sometimes we must be broken to discover that we are much stronger than we ever believed, and far more worthy of true love than we ever allowed ourselves to imagine." The words resonated differently now, not as a desperate affirmation but as a proven truth. Her journey from Tate's shadow to the life she'd built with Henry hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks, doubts, and challenges along the way, but each obstacle had only confirmed what she'd written in that moment of raw hope, that she possessed a strength she'd never fully recognized. The next morning, a Sunday, brought unexpected news. Tate had called, asking to speak with both Harper and Henry about something important. Intrigued and slightly concerned, they agreed to meet him at a cafe near their home while the girls had a playdate with friends. Tate arrived looking nervous, clutching a manila envelope. "Thank you for meeting me," he began after they ordered coffee. "I wanted to discuss this with you in person rather than through lawyers." He slid the envelope across the table to Harper. Inside, she found legal documents transferring ownership of a beach house on Cape Cod, one of the few properties that hadn't been seized in the fraud investigation, to Phoebe's name, with Harper and Henry designated as trustees until she turned 25. "I'm moving to Seattle next month," Tate explained as Harper reviewed the paperwork. "I've been offered a position with a non-profit that helps formerly incarcerated individuals reintegrate into society." Harper looked up in surprise. "Seattle? That's across the country." "It is," Tate acknowledged, "which is why I wanted to talk to you both first. I know we've established a visitation routine, and Phoebe is just getting comfortable with it." "You're giving up your parental rights?" Henry asked, his tone carefully neutral. "No," Tate replied quickly. "I want to remain in Phoebe's life in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. Video calls, holiday visits, summer weeks when she's older. But the opportunity in Seattle it feels like purpose, something meaningful I can do with the second chance I've been given." Harper studied her ex-husband, trying to reconcile the man before her with the one she'd married years ago. The Tate she had known would never have prioritized meaningful work over status or chosen a modest non-profit role over rebuilding his business empire. "This is what you really want?" she asked. "It is," Tate confirmed. "For the first time in my life, I'm making choices based on what feels right rather than what looks impressive." As they discussed logistics and schedules, Harper felt the final pieces of a long, unfinished puzzle sliding into place. The anger and resentment she had carried toward Tate for so long had gradually transformed into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. They had both changed, grown in different directions, healed in their own ways. Walking home after the meeting, hand in hand with Henry, Harper reflected on the winding path that had led to this moment. "You're quiet," Henry observed. "Processing?" Harper nodded. "Just thinking about how life rarely turns out the way we expect. 6 years ago I thought my story was over. Failed marriage, single motherhood, career plateau. And now I know it was just beginning." She squeezed his hand. "The best chapters came after what I thought was the end." That evening, as the last light of day filtered through their kitchen windows and the sounds of the girls playing drifted down from upstairs, Harper added a new entry to the family journal she'd started when she and Henry married, a chronicle of their blended family's journey, meant to be shared with Emma and Phoebe when they were grown. She wrote about Tate's decision, about the unexpected peace it brought, about the realization that sometimes those who hurt us most deeply can still evolve and change. She wrote about the weight of love, not the burden of trying to be worthy of it, but the substantive, grounding force of love freely given and received. As she closed the journal, her eye caught the framed quote hanging above her desk. The same words from her old journal, now rendered in beautiful calligraphy, a gift from Henry on their first anniversary. "Sometimes we must be broken to discover that we are much stronger than we ever believed, and far more worthy of true love than we ever allowed ourselves to imagine." The words had once been a desperate hope, then a proven truth. Now they were simply a reminder of where she had been, how far she had come, and the infinite possibilities that still lay ahead. Harper smiled, feeling the comforting weight of her life, her real life, her authentic life, settling around her like a favorite blanket. Not perfect, not without challenges, but genuinely, completely hers. And that, she had finally learned, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If this story touched your heart, and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now, and we'll see you there.